Good evening all and welcome. Tonight, a collection of haunted house stories for you to enjoy. And if anything spooky or scary has ever happened to you and you would like to share it, email me at themortismedia@gmail.com. Email address can be found in the description. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. When I was around 9 or 10, I remember waking up in the middle of the night to see a large shadow standing at the foot of my bed. This is one of those special memories that has been burned into my brain, and I can still perfectly picture it years later. At the time, I was living with my dad at a very large terrace house that had 5 floors. The building was probably built sometime in the 1800s and was very old and creaky. Every so often, there would be an unexplainable event, like footsteps when no one else was about, or you'd hear a voice coming from another part of the house when it was just the two of us. My dad never really liked to talk about it, and after a while I stopped bringing it up because it made him uncomfortable. On the night this happened, it was just my dad and me in the house. My sister was staying with my mum at the time, so the whole place was basically empty except for us. Well, I woke up suddenly. At first, I thought maybe I had a bad dream or something, but I couldn't remember any dream at all. I just opened my eyes wide and noticed the door to my room was wide open. I normally sleep with it closed, always had, so seeing it open like that immediately made me uneasy. I could now see the dark hallway beyond. Then I became acutely aware of a large shadow-like figure standing at the foot of my bed. It must have been around 7 feet tall, and it was just watching me. But I couldn't discern any features, just this massive, hulking shadow that blocked most of what I could see at the end of the bed. I couldn't move, nor speak. I couldn't do anything but simply stare at it. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might wake my dad on the floor below, but I knew he couldn't hear me even if he was awake. When the figure noticed that I was awake, it seemed to melt into the floor. 1 second it was there, solid and tall, and the next, it was gone, like it had been eaten by the wooden floorboards. At that exact moment, the door to my room slammed shut with enough force to make the whole frame shake. Understandably, I was traumatized by the whole experience and did not sleep for the rest of the night. I lay there with my blanket pulled up to my chin, staring at the door, waiting for something else to happen, but it never did. And I stayed awake until the sun came up. I know that much. The next morning, I asked my dad if he had been in my room during the night. He denied any knowledge of the event, and he's not the kind of person that likes to joke or lie, or sneak around and mess with his kids. He seemed genuinely confused when I told him about it, and he had no explanation for the door being open nor the slam. For a long time I chose to keep this story to myself and never told anyone about it. Even now I don't really like to talk about it unless someone brings up the paranormal, and I can usually chime in with this story. Over the years, to the few select people I have told, some of them have offered explanations. One person suggested it could be my imagination or a dream. But to those people I say, I know I was awake. I know I was fully conscious. And that thing was real. 2 weeks before we moved, my dad and I toured our house, and I noticed some guy painting the water heater. I thought that was weird, but I was only 10. So chose not to think more of it. We moved in on a Wednesday, and my parents let me stay home from school until the following Monday. They kept me occupied with coloring books and a new dollhouse. In my brand new crayon pack, there literally wasn't a blue crayon. It was a 64 pack, but there were only 63 in it. One day, I went downstairs into the basement, and my missing blue crayon was sitting next to the hot water heater, and scribbled on the metal it said, "Hi Gwen, Marcus." I was so confused. I started school the next week, and my new classmates were like, "Oh my god, do you live in Marcus's house? Your house is going to be haunted." It turns out that Marcus was an 8-year-old boy who resided in the house before we did. And, tragically, he got hit by a car in the front yard. He would leave notes if you left out a pen and paper, open and close drawers, doors, adjust the thermostat, and always turn on the Christmas music when it was that time of year. We had a swing set in the backyard, and even on the hottest, calmest days of summer, the swing on the left-hand side would move back and forth of its own accord. We had this dumb cat that I would lock in my bedroom at night, and every morning my parents would open the door in order to let him out, and then close it back. Well, one night I woke up, and the cat was meowing at the door, which woke me. The door opened, the cat hissed and ran out really fast. I asked my mum the next morning why they didn't close my door, and they told me they'd never opened it. This last story is when I was very upset and nearly suicidal one year during Christmas break. The police just randomly showed up at my house. The officer said he was patrolling our neighborhood and felt like something was wrong at our house. And I am absolutely certain that Marcus had something to do with it. My little sister Susie and I were exploring an abandoned cottage near where we live a few years ago. That's where we came across a pair of walkie-talkies. Now this itself isn't unusual. It's in an isolated space, and lots of people come to do urban exploring here, and I guess you can say that people leave things when they come and go. We ran around in the night trying them out, and found that there's about a 10 to 20 meter cutoff range. Anything beyond that and the signal simply died. We were fooling around, running through the halls and hiding in various rooms, when eventually we ended up on opposite sides of the cottage, when something like the following exchange went down. "Breaker, breaker, come in, this is Thundercat, over." Susie then began to giggle. "This is Dragon 7. We are closing in on your location, over." "Negative, you'll never catch me. Thundercat out." "Who is this?" "This is Thundercat. Come in, Poopsmith." Susie, giggling. "No, who is this?" At this point, I walked into the next room and saw Susie looking through a bookshelf, the walkie-talkie abandoned on the floor right beside her. She wasn't holding it, she wasn't even near it. She said, "Hello," to me looking confused. But the giggling was still coming from the walkie-talkie. I look at her, look at the walkie-talkie and ask, "Wait, who is this?" The giggling stops on the other end of the line, and there's nothing but dead air. The next house is a couple of kilometers away, and there is nothing but woods nearby, and a spooky cave. No one else was near. Susie said she got bored of the walkie-talkie a while ago, and denies any part of the goofy codename conversation. She kept saying she didn't talk back after a certain point. And of course, I actually heard someone talk through it while she wasn't using it, and she's no ventriloquist. We searched the place from top to bottom and found no one and nothing that could have been making the call. We tried the walkie-talkie a few more times and stood in the same spot, yelled the same things, but we were never able to get the ghost girl to talk again. The walkie-talkies just worked as they should. I still accuse her of having been the voice on the other end of the line, joking around, but deep down, I know it wasn't her. I lived in a house built in 1938, and from the moment we moved in, something strange started happening. I would wake up and sit up in bed every single night at exactly 2:59 to 3:01 a.m. It became this weird routine where I'd jolt awake at the same time. I thought I saw something move quickly out of the corner of my eye on occasion, but I assumed it was me being sleepy, or my poor vision as I wasn't wearing my glasses. Then one night, the curtain on my closet moved. I wasn't even fully awake at first, but I saw it swish, like someone had walked past it or brushed against it. I pulled the lamp chain and the room lit up. My husband thought I was crazy when I told him in the morning. I saw nothing when I looked, so I pulled the chain again to turn the lamp off and tried to go back to sleep. A few minutes later, I heard the lamp chain swinging against the lamp base. It was making this light clinking sound over and over. I reached out to see if I could feel the swing and to stop it, and when my hand got close, something cold touched me. It didn't feel like the shape of a hand or a finger. It felt, well, mostly like a wet washcloth, just damp and cold against my skin. I sat up immediately and turned the lamp back on and checked the whole room, but there was nothing. My husband came in and I showed him where it happened, but he didn't feel anything weird and never believed me. We moved soon after that due to relocation, but I stopped waking up every morning at the same time in the new house, and haven't had a weird feeling since. It never happened again, as a matter of fact. My friend Jessica and I were at our other friend Grace's apartment just hanging out on some random evening. As we're sitting there, Grace proceeds to tell me and Jessica about some of the weird stuff that has been going on in her apartment. She said at night she heard footsteps as though someone was walking around in her living room, but when she got up to check, there was no one there. She told us that sometimes things were not where she had left them, like they had been moved, and she knew she didn't do it. She said she heard voices at times she shouldn't have been able to hear, the neighbors or anyone, such as when she was in the shower with the water running. Now, Grace had moved in by herself because her boyfriend had obligations in our hometown for a few months and wouldn't be able to relocate for a few weeks. So Grace was in a new place all by herself for the first time, and that, coupled with the copious amounts of bud she'd smoked, made me think she was just tripping out and paranoid. I figured it was all in her head, stress from being in a new place alone. Jessica and I are trying to calm her down because she's getting kind of upset and desperate for us to believe her. I'm in the process of telling her every rational explanation I come up with. Thin walls, she's hearing the neighbors come home late, or maybe it's all in her imagination. And then the craziest thing happens that to this day, 9 years later, I cannot explain. The couch we are sitting on is at least 7 feet from the entertainment center bookshelf that is directly across from us and attached to the wall. The books on the shelf are tightly packed side by side with no gaps or loose sections. There are no open doors or windows, so no wind in the apartment and everything is closed up tight. But yet despite all of this, a notebook, your typical college rule spiral-bound notebook, comes flipping out end over end and lands halfway in between us and the shelf it launched itself from. Grace, Jessica, and myself are just silent. We look at the notebook and then each other, and then at the notebook again. It flew. It didn't simply fall off the shelf, which would have been weird and unexplainable enough. It launched on an upwards and outwards trajectory, like it had been flung by someone's hand. None of us really had anything to say for a long time. Jessica and myself now had to admit that maybe, just maybe, Grace had been experiencing some weird stuff, and I had to seriously reevaluate a lot of my understanding of how the world works. There was no way that stupid notebook could have done that, and it did anyway. Really made me think about things differently. The house I grew up in had a slightly strange design. All the bedrooms were clumped together at one end of the house, and the kitchen and living room were at the other end. The two areas were connected by a long, narrow hallway that had a bathroom in the middle and approximately 900 closets on either side. My bedroom door was at the end of the hall, with 2 other bedroom doors facing each other across the hall on either side. Basically, this meant that if you were sitting in our living room, you could look straight down the hallway to my bedroom. There were no walls or corners blocking the view, because it was just one long straight shot down the entire length of hall. Now, lots of strange and frightening things happened in that house over the years. There were the usual creepy things like objects disappearing and reappearing at different times and in different locations. Things flying off the shelves with nothing visible to have caused them to do so. Strange voices no one could account the origin of, or phantom breezes, and doors opening by themselves. But the one thing we could never rationalize away or lie to ourselves about was the darkness at the end of the hall. Like I said, the hallway was very long and narrow, and it was panelled in dark wood from floor to ceiling, so it was pretty dark down there even under normal conditions. But with the living room lights on, there was always enough light to see down the hallway and make out my bedroom door clearly. That's what made it so weird. But sometimes we'd be sitting in the living room just watching TV or talking, and get the feeling that we were being watched. When that would come over us, the end of the hallway would be completely blacked out, almost as if someone had dropped a thick, velvet black curtain over the end of the hall. You could see part of the way down, maybe half or 2/3, but then there would just be this solid darkness. When this would happen, our 3 little dogs, God bless them, would immediately go to the mouth of the hallway and sit in a line across it, staring down into the dark. They were tiny dogs, nothing scary about them. Sometimes they'd bark a little or growl low in their throats, but mostly they just sat still and stared. Once in a while, one of them would get brave enough to walk down the hall, but they never got more than halfway to the darkness before they'd stop and back up. They would walk backwards up the hall, step by step, never turning their back on whatever they were looking at. After a while, the oppressive feeling would lift, the darkness would disappear, and the dogs would wander off like nothing had happened. This didn't happen often, mind you, maybe a handful of times at best, but compared to the normal spookiness in that house, that was the one thing we could never convince ourselves was simply in our heads, and we couldn't explain it away as shadows or poor lighting. It was something else entirely. But what it was, we never found out. And perhaps it's better that way. My dad moved into this rented house when I was about 12. I have so many stories to share about this home, but for now, I think I'll just start with one. From the moment we walked inside, there was this uncomfortable feeling in the air, like we weren't the first ones to live there. Maybe some of you can relate to that feeling. When I was 14, my dad went out for the night and left me home to babysit my brother, who was around 7 at the time. This wasn't difficult. I was used to babysitting him, even though he was annoying when we were at my mum's place, but this was something I had never been asked to do at my dad's. We'd already heard weird noises, seen shadows move with nothing to cause them, and had the overwhelming feeling frequently that someone was watching us. But we stayed because we had no choice. Now my dad is a hardcore antique dealer. He had a bunch of old antique clocks on top of an antique radio in the living room. I mean old school clocks. The ones that were made before the inventions of batteries. Some even had bells on. Several different kinds from several different eras, including Victorian to the early 1900s. They all displayed different times and never changed, as they were just decoration, broken pieces of history that my dad enjoyed collecting. That night was the first of many nights, only when my dad wasn't home, that every single one of those clocks went off at exactly 3 a.m. The sound was deafening, all 5 of them ringing at once. This overwhelming chorus in the middle of the night. Naturally, my brother and I absolutely panicked. We were wide awake, Because how do you turn off 5 ancient clocks that you don't even know how to work? Most of them were rusted and hadn't worked in decades. We frantically fidgeted with them, trying to stop the noise, and after about a minute or so, they all seemed to die. This went on for years, every and exclusively when my dad left us home alone. We'd be laying in bed, waiting, just knowing it was coming. It's been over 20 years now, and we both still talk about our experiences there. Neither of us have been able to explain away how or why it happened, and only when my dad wasn't there. I want to start by saying that I personally am more on the skeptic side when it comes to paranormal experiences, but enough things have happened in the last year to at least make me question that and entertain the possibility that this is legit and not simply my daughter's active imagination. These events have occurred only in the house my husband and I bought in June of 2017, which was built in the 1920s. First, in October of 2017, I was laying her down for bed in the dark, with only moonlight lighting the room, when she pointed across the room animatedly and asked, "Mum, who's that guy?" I looked for a toy or something she could be referring to, yet saw nothing, so I asked, "What guy, honey?" She responded that, "He's right there," and gestured towards the closed bedroom door. Still curious, I asked her what he was doing in case I could piece together some recent episode of pretend play or a toy she commonly talked about. She said he was hiding. I asked if she was scared and she said, "No, he's hiding." That was creepy. During this whole exchange, she was calm and chipper, not frightened. But what made it strange was that she was 2 and didn't really engage in pretend play or storytelling, and there were no toys in sight. From there, we just had a funny toddler story to tell our friends and family that we affectionately named That Guy. This is the umbrella name we generally use for any other episode or weird stuff that happens around the house. That guy is just pranking us. Well, in February of 2018, I was again laying her down for bed, along with her then 6-month-old brother. We were doing all the usual cuddle-up night-night talk, when she said something along the lines of, "Now it's time for bed. Just me, and you, and him, and her." My skeptic mind would argue that him could easily have been her little brother, but at the time she was still adjusting to having a sibling and rarely mentioned him, and he wasn't included in any of her talk that we were just having. What's really strange was her. Who's her? The only other female in the house is our cat, and she was not in the room at the time. Also, no toys were in bed with us, and no one was in the vicinity of her bed that she could have been referring to. A little later in the spring, a new name joined the conversation: Mr. Longneck. To give you a bit of backstory, my daughter has this weird thing where she likes touching necks. Sometimes it's cuddly, sometimes it's when she's playing. We can't really explain it, other than kids do weird stuff sometimes, and it started before we moved into this house. Anyway, she was getting put down for a nap, and was a little high-strung. She was doing her usual neck-grabbing thing and suddenly did it a little tougher than usual, but not enough to hurt, and said in a growly voice, "Mr. Longneck, Mr. Longneck." I've never heard her use that name, and it isn't a character in any YouTube or Netflix show she watches, so I asked her who Mr. Longneck was. She just kind of giggled it off, and was asleep 10 minutes later. This is when I began to get creeped out from her stories. In April of 2018, my husband found a time capsule in one of our heating vents, and we spent the afternoon looking through it. There had been a fire in our home in 2009, which we knew about, and in which no one thankfully was hurt. During the renovation after the fire, the owners at the time found a bunch of old stuff in the walls and included it with some pictures of the fire and a couple of newspaper clippings. Among the old stuff was a pack of pearl buttons, some store catalogues from the 1940s, and a small notebook with some handwritten names inside. I presumed these are the names of the original inhabitants, and I plan to find the book again and look up the history behind the names and the home as well. After all of this, my husband and I are suspicious that there is something paranormal going on, and maybe these objects are keeping some energy here. In about October of 2018, I was driving to my mum's house with my son and daughter in the car. Along the way, my daughter, now 3, asked from the back seat, "Mum, is that Grandpa?" "Where?" She pointed to the empty seat in front and said, "Right there." I told her Grandpa was at home, as he had recently moved in with us due to health issues. There was no one around on the street or sidewalk for her to point at either. Now, there have been minor other events that have happened, but these were the largest ones in detail to describe. While we have to an extent encouraged her to feel comfortable talking about it, we've never pushed it, in order to avoid leading to the conversation or pulling answers out of her that she would offer just to appease the conversation. Throughout our conversations, she has given us the following: that Mr. Longneck is a grown-up. He wears a monster's clothes and a hat. He is nice but also scary. He says trick or treat and doesn't wear a costume. He lives far away and goes with Santa in the sky to his house where he belongs. She says he comes to our house at nap time, which she no longer has, but was generally in the afternoon. He knocks on our big patio door, walks through the kitchen, and these were her exact words. And while she was telling me this, she was pointing a path from the door to one of our living room windows. I asked her what he says or does, and among a few other things she mentioned he played in the kitchen with her and the spiny toy cow. This is one of those Fisher-Price pull-string farm toys that she never plays with. I rarely see it, and I've never seen it in the kitchen. This specific detail piqued my interest. I also asked if he ever brought a friend, to see if I could follow up on the her mentioned earlier. He brings a friend. She's a little girl, not a grown-up, and has yellow hair like me. She's never scared of these talks, although she withdraws from the conversation when I ask about why his neck is so long. In 2012, my stepfather overdosed on heroin and dropped dead in the hallway of his condo apartment. Just like that. He was here 1 minute, and the next, he was gone. My mum had to move out shortly after, since they were already behind on mortgage payments, and the place went into foreclosure and eventually got sold. But for a few months it sat empty, while all the legal stuff was being sorted out. A few months later, my lease where I was living went up, and I was barely making ends meet as it was. I couldn't find a new roommate, my applications were getting rejected, and honestly, I was one missed paycheck away from being completely screwed by the system. In desperation, I spoke to my mum, expecting her to offer me some small amount of money to get me back on my feet. But instead, she offered me the key to the condo apartment to squat for a few months, until I saved up enough for my own. She said it was empty anyway, and that for the meantime no one was living there, and she had the owner's permission since she still had some connection to the property through the foreclosure process. I jumped on the offer, and moved into the condo apartment. It was honestly very strange living in the place where he died, but after all, it was just a place to live. I put my stuff in, and set up my stuff in the living room since that's where the couch was, and tried my best to feel at home. After a month or so, I was asleep on the couch in the living room one night, and I had this dream of him standing in the hallway facing the living room. He was looking at me and smiling. He even made one of his stupid dad jokes, Even though I'd laugh, I'd always roll my eyes. It felt quite bittersweet. Then suddenly I woke up, when I felt some pressure stroking down the back of my head. It was this gentle, warm feeling, like someone running their hand through my hair and down my spine. I jerked awake and sat up, looking around the entire living room, but there was nothing around me, no one there, just an empty apartment and the dark hallway behind where I had been sleeping. It tripped me the hell out, and I sat there for what felt like forever, just breathing and trying to figure out what the hell that was. I was completely alone in that place. No one had a key except my mum, and she was a long way away. As a skeptical person that doesn't believe in the paranormal, I know it has some kind of rational, probably a sensory hallucination maybe. Maybe my brain was still half asleep and just created the sensation. Or it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I mean, I've heard sleep paralysis can do weird stuff, right? But all the same, I've never had anything like that happen to me before or since. And if it was a dream, it felt real enough. Honestly, I'm not sure what to believe. So I've lived in a house in the north of England for 20 years now. I'm 24 years old. The amount of paranormal experiences I've had has been crazy. The earliest stories are from before I had even gained sentience. My mom and other family members would tell me stories of an imaginary friend I had called Bobby. I have no recollection of Bobby. I only know what I am told. My mum says I would often wake up in the middle of the night having crawled out of my cot and playing in the pitch black of the upper landing. She'd ask me who I was talking to / playing with, and I'd say Bobby and Daddy, as my father died months before I was born, and my mum kept this info from me as a child. I would sometimes wake her up at 2 a.m. and say, "Mummy, Bobby wants a bottle or he's going to kill you." No BS. This is what I'm told. Creepy as hell, right? This was actually in the house next door to the one I live in now. We lived there for around 2 years. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. My earliest experience of haunting were the bathroom taps. I was a very scaredy kid, so I would sleep in my mother's bed a lot, probably for longer than I should have. And I can remember for months at a time every night, as we were going to sleep, the taps in the bathroom would turn on ever so slightly at first, then progressively open more and more. One of us would have to get out of bed and turn the taps off tight. It was very unsettling. Mum got a plumber out to look at the taps, and he looked at her like she was crazy when she told him the taps were turning on by themselves. This gradually came to an end, and I sort of forgot about it. Then I think maybe the year I graduated, I must have been around 13 at the time. It was a dark evening in winter, and I think I was getting ready to leave the house. As I was just about to leave, I heard my TV on in the bedroom, and I was the only one home. I don't know how I mustered the courage, but I ran upstairs to see what was going on, and my TV volume had turned itself to 100 and was playing some random channel. I didn't even know my TV could pick up channels, as I always used to plug in the DVD player. That's what's crazy. When you turned that TV on, it was usually preset to volume 20 and would show a blank black screen. The attic was also creepy as hell too. It was converted into a spare bedroom for my former stepsister and I to stay up there with her. She was probably about 16 and I must have been about 10. I remember one day, a book fell off the shelf for no apparent reason, and I swear after she moved out, I would still hear footsteps through the ceiling and the sound of plug sockets switching at night from up there as well. I also have dreams about ghosts constantly. I was keeping a dream journal in my phone that I must have deleted by accident, and I swear 90% of the entries would be me fighting ghosts or being chased or being in the house. I remember a dream of me sleeping in the garden because there was a ghost in the window watching me. and I went through a phase where I would wake up at 3 a.m. every night like clockwork for no reason whatsoever. I would just wake up, feel uneasy as hell. Sometimes it would be like 3:07 or sometimes earlier, but it was consistent that it would have to be around 3 a.m. roughly, and I'd never have to check my watch because I'd know. Hands down, the most terrifying moments were when my mum moved in with her new boyfriend, and me being a teenager, decided that living alone in the house would be cool as hell. So one night I'm laying in bed, it must have been around 11 p.m, and just as I'm about to fall asleep, my bedroom door swings open. It stops at 90 degrees. The door was clicked shut, and I swear to God there was not a single window open, and even if it was, the door had some friction from the carpet, so no amount of wind or draft could generate the force required to push open the door. I wasn't scared at that moment though. My mind was too perplexed to experience fear, I think. I sat up in bed and just stared at the door. After a few moments, it dawned on me how terrifying that was, and I went and stayed at my nana's house. 2 weeks later, I'm plagued with the exact same scenario. I'm in bed, about to fall asleep, and this time my TV remote flies from my bedside table to the other side of the room. Again, I went and stayed with my nana. My stepdad used to get pissed with me for being scared of my room, until he decided to stay there one night after a fight with my mum. He told my mum later he was so sorry for the way he had been with me about my room. He was scared too, and ended up staying downstairs. And he was a big, bald, scary-looking guy as well. The final room experience I had was when I woke up at 3 a.m. one night for some reason, and I had the huge urge to look underneath my bed. I swear to God, I saw the outline of what looked like a woman. I could see long hair and a human outline figure. I laid my head back, realized what I'd just seen, and lifted my head again. And it was still there. That was when my fight, flight, or freeze response kicked in, and I launched off the bed to punch whatever it was. Obviously there was nothing there, and I had just punched the air, and I did go back to sleep. I have dubbed the ghost as Bobby at this point, and sort of came to terms with the fact that I have my own ghost that used to be my friend too. So when I was about 20 years old, I got into the habit that whenever I was drunk, I'd come home and taunt Bobby. I'd asked him to move stuff and call him a wuss when he wouldn't. I swear, one night I asked him to move back a cigarette on the table in front of me. And he did, but no one believed me. We had a houseplant in the front room. I had been taunting the ghost after coming home from the pub, when all of a sudden I see the leaves of this plant swaying as if something was caressing them. My heart sunk, and I stood up to have a closer look. Half terrified and half curious, I edged closer. Next thing, a moth flew in the open door from the hall and landed on the ceiling lights. And right after that, and I swear it on my father's grave, the lights in my house went crazy. They would all dim down and then brighten up, as if they were pulsating, and it was every light in the house, the bathroom light upstairs, the hallway, all of them. I just bolted outside and ran to my stepdad's house with nothing but my house keys and my phone. This became a common occurrence when I would get drunk and provoke the ghost. The scariest story I actually have is when my mum and stepdad were staying at home and I had been drinking again. They were upstairs asleep, and I was downstairs listening to music on the TV. I decided to test my ghostly friend once and for all with a Ouija board. I made it crudely from paper and sat asking questions to Bobby. Nothing happened. That is until about an hour later, when I got up to use the bathroom. Halfway up the stairs, I hear this enormous crash from downstairs. It sounded like someone had launched a heavy glass table across the room. I didn't dare go down right away, so I opened my mum's bedroom door to see if they had heard it too. They were fast asleep. I went downstairs reluctantly to check out the noise, and not a single thing was out of place. I've been scared of this house more times than I can remember. These experiences would all come with a sickening, foreboding feeling. The best way I can describe it is a feeling that prompted you to want to get the hell out of there. A few years back, I was living with my boyfriend and his sister in a cottage that was built before the Civil War. It was an old place and full of character and strange quirks, and we had a few things happen over the span of about a year and a half that we lived there. At first, I thought it was just them messing with me. They'd both mentioned things falling over at random, little things I didn't really think about all that much. That's when I started noticing things that I couldn't explain. Our small kitchen was by the back door, and we had a countertop with our cutlery in a drawer that, when open, would block most of the entrance into the kitchen. It was one of the drawers that closed magnetically and didn't have a handle or knob. We would go back out to smoke, and when we came back in, the cutlery drawer would be completely open, blocking the entrance. It couldn't have snagged on someone's clothing, and it had to be pulled quite firmly to open because of the magnets. There was no way that it just popped open of its own accord. I still didn't think much of this, and things continued to escalate. One evening my boyfriend and I were out, and his sister called us to tell us that the cat food container, which was probably about 10 to 15 pounds when full, and stacked on top of another larger container, somehow toppled over while she and all the animals were in her room. The animals were all fine, just sitting there, and she said the container fell for no reason. One morning, the bathtub filled itself up. We came downstairs and there was water everywhere. The tub completely full, yet none of us had touched it. We would be sitting on the sofa watching TV, and a ball would suddenly roll across the floor from under a bed or in a corner, and the dogs would start playing with it and stare at a certain spot in the room as if someone was standing there. They'd growl at times, other times they'd just wag their tails and stare at nothing. Then one night, I woke up to adjust the thermostat, which was directly across a small hallway from the bathroom. I glanced over because someone was on the toilet with the lights out, and the door open. I apologized, assuming it was my boyfriend's sister, when I realized that this girl was much more petite and looked nothing like her. She had long hair and was wearing something light-colored, maybe a nightgown. I glanced back, and no one was there. I wasn't very sleepy or incoherent because the heat had been keeping me up, so I do believe I actually saw someone. Regardless, she seemed to be friendly. She played with our dogs and they never behaved scared around her. We moved out a few months later. Neither my boyfriend nor his sister ever really talked about what happened after we left. They kinda just agreed it was time we move on. In my childhood home, I would often hear touch typing coming from the computer downstairs early in the morning. I wouldn't think much of it at first. My parents worked from home, and it wouldn't be uncommon to wake up in the morning to hear Mum typing away on the computer. And we had one of those old, fat keyboards, not those lovely slim new ones, so you could really hear the clickety-clack of the keys as they were being smashed down. Well, one day, I got up and called out to my mum, assuming she was down there working since I could hear the typing, but received no answer. No one was down there at all. I knew I heard it. This began happening regularly. I figured I was so used to hearing typing from downstairs that I was hearing things that weren't there, and I didn't mention anything to anyone, figuring I was getting auditory hallucinations or going a bit crazy. This happened on and off over a period of 6 months. The sound of fast typing, the furious click of a mouse, like someone was working really hard on something. And one morning as I was eating my breakfast, I heard my mum at the top of the stairs call out to me, "You're not down there on that computer already?" I froze and ran out to her. I was amazed she had heard it too. She was convinced she could hear the typing, yet no one was down there. I told her all about the times I'd been hearing it, and then my sister opened up about hearing it regularly too when no one was down there. So I wasn't crazy after all. I set out to catch whatever was causing it, and try to discover a rational explanation for it. I'd sprint out of my bedroom to the top of the stairs, where I was able to look down into the room to see if anyone was on the computer. No such luck. Every time I got there, it stopped right when I arrived, and the typing would just cut off. I think it went on for a few years and we just kind of learned to live with it, as it wasn't really an everyday thing. Sometimes weeks would go by and we'd never hear anything. I was down there once when the ceiling light globe in the center of the room began flashing very fast. It then exploded, and glass shattered all across the room. I was lucky I ran out the room when it started happening because I was afraid. The whole mysterious typing thing, if I hadn't have run, I'd have been hit by bits of glass. Around the same time, I was on the computer at home by myself, when something happened that resulted in me never being alone in that room again. I felt and heard this really sharp intake of breath directly behind my right shoulder near my ear, almost as if someone had leaned in and breathed right next to me. I've never run so fast in my life and was hesitant going into that room ever again. Prior to that, the whole typing thing had just been something weird and a bit spooky, but not scary, and it still makes my heart race whenever I think about it. I've never really encountered anything like this before or since. I don't particularly believe in ghosts either, but I'm open to the possibilities of something that scientists don't have a proper explanation for yet. When I lived in an older house, it had a good location in a residential area. It was large and airy, and let in a good amount of light. The neighbors were nice, and the street was quiet. An almost idyllic place to live in some respects. But there were many instances over the 8 years that I lived there that we experienced something abnormal, like the sound of someone running from the kitchen to the bathroom, heavy footsteps, and it happened more vividly when no one was in the building and everyone had gone away from the holidays. The house would be completely empty except for us, and the sound would echo through the hall. My mum heard that this time, and we heard it on other occasions too. We'd all be sitting in different rooms, and then suddenly we'd hear a fast running from one end of the house to the other. We also experienced sleep paralysis multiple times, waking up unable to move, and feeling like something was pressing down on my chest, and seeing shadows from the corner of my eye. My mum once saw my shadow pass by the room when I was at tuition. I wasn't even home. I was at my first tutoring class miles away. She swore she saw me walk past the doorway, but when she called me, my phone showed I was still at tuition. One time I heard my mum whispering in an excited way, "Hey, come here, I want to show you something," from outside the bedroom window. I was in the kitchen doing dishes and said, "Coming," and even went there, only to realize my parents had gone out for the evening. I almost lifted the window curtain to see what she wanted to show me. My heart was racing. I stood there for a long time staring at that window, wondering what it was I almost saw. Now these incidents were not too frequent, neither violent nor too obvious, which is why we didn't leave. But it was a really good house, like I said at the start otherwise. Another incident I vividly remember happened about a month before we were due to leave. I was studying late into the night and was fully awake. I had an exam the next day. It must have been around 3 a.m. when a black shape, like a dementor, just flew by at a high speed towards the window that led outside. It was moving so fast, and when it went through the wall, there was a sound too, like heavy air banging against something. I was shocked and kept looking towards it for quite some time. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't move for a while. But a little later, I continued studying again, even though I could not shake it off. It just felt like now that we were about to leave, whatever was in there also left. like it knew we were going and was ready to go with us, or maybe perhaps was done with us. We moved out, and we never heard those footsteps again. This story takes place around 2016. Around this time I was 15 years old, and I was planning on going trick-or-treating like normal on Halloween. However, some of my friends wanted to go to a haunted place. Now, it was about an hour from where I lived at the time, but this old house was abandoned, a 2-story house like a mini mansion. At first, I didn't want to go, however, peer pressure's a thing, and I ended up going. When I got there, I immediately sensed something was weird. That's important because ever since I was around the age of 3, I've been able to see people that aren't there, apparitions if you will, but normally I shrugged them off since it was a normal thing for me. But this place, I felt the same ghostly presence, but it no longer felt friendly, but threatening. So I tried to get my friends to back out, but of course they didn't listen. They tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. When I stepped up to the door, it creaked open. At this point I was freaking out. I did not want to be there, but of course, at that young age, peer pressure is hard, so I decided to stay with them even though every sense in my body was telling me not to. I ignored it for the sake of not wanting to be called a chicken at school. So, reluctantly, we all entered. I entered last for clarification. The door just closed, and I was already kind of scared, but kept it together as best I could. We sat down in the center of the living room, which was decorated with an old, washed-out red rug, and furniture scattered all over the place. When we sat down, my friends pulled out a Ouija board, and I don't mean one of the store-bought ones. This one looked hand-carved out of wood, and the symbols had been burned in. Now I was on the verge of leaving, but I decided to stay because I was morbidly curious. So they set up the Ouija board, and then Zoe asked, "Is anyone here tonight?" And the piece moved to yes. I didn't say anything, not knowing what to comment or say in the situation. Xavier asked, "How many of you are there?" The piece moved to 1. My friend Yasmin decided to ask if there was anyone specific, and it moved to yes. But we decided to ask a few other questions, afraid of who they might say. So we asked them, "How old are you? How's your day? What's your name? How did you die?" Of course, the thing didn't want to answer these questions at all, but when we asked it who it was here for, it spelled out Leo, and I turned about as pale as a ghost, because that was my name. The friend group was shocked for a minute without saying anything. They all turned and looked at me. Then I got up and said, "Sorry guys, I'm out." When I got up, the Ouija board caught fire from the candles we had around it to help increase the spiritual energy. The candles also had their flames burst high, and then the dressers and cabinets started opening and closing by themselves. I booked it. The window was open because I had opened it earlier when we entered, and I just fell out the window and booked it home. I didn't even care that I was an hour from home. I needed to get as far away from there as possible. Eventually, when I got home, they sent me a text explaining that after I left, everything went haywire. They said things were flying at them, trying to hit them, and they left, got in their car and drove away. Let's just say these friends of mine tried to get me to go on a few more escapades, but I said no to all of them, except for one. 2 years after this event, I was 17. I hadn't been in contact with my friends from the first group in a while, just because I was dealing with my own demons at the time. The head of the group ended up calling me and asking if I wanted to try one more time to see if I could stay there longer than the last. This time I was a little more thrilled because of the experience I'd gone through, so decided to give it one more go. But I told them on the condition that if I felt something was really off, I would not go into the house, and he agreed. So when Halloween rolled around, he drove over and picked me up. I decided to have a bit of a nap because it was a few hours away from where I lived and to where we were going. A couple of miles away from the house, I had this really weird dream. I was in the house itself, inside the front room. I was looking around trying to figure out where I was when I heard a creaking sound. So I looked up to see the source of the noise, and what I saw was this curvy woman with certain features standing at the top of the staircase with long, elongated fingers and sharp-looking teeth. Before I could get a better look, I woke up. Now usually I'll brush these kind of dreams off if I'm at my house, but I had a feeling I was getting this dream because whatever was inside the house was trying to get my attention before I even got there, which generally is already a red flag when you come to visit these kind of places. So I stayed awake, and about a mile away I could feel the aura had gotten stronger. It was a gentle but deviant aura, which typically meant that it's a female spirit. For those wondering, male spirits are more intimidating and threatening, but it can be hard to pick up sometimes. Anyway, when we were about half a mile away, the aura I had been feeling earlier had gotten more intense, which is another red flag, meaning the spirit does not see us as a threat and is openly presenting herself, which means she is very confident. At this point I was sweating a lot. I looked red in the face and I was nervous, but decided to soldier on. When we were getting close to the house, I'd say about a quarter of a mile away from the driveway, I could see a figure in the top left window of this 2-story abandoned house, pacing back and forth. I wasn't 100% sure why she was being so open, but I wasn't going to question everything just yet. As we were getting closer, I asked if they could see her, and to my surprise they could. If someone who normally can't see spirits like these three can now see them, it means she's putting herself on full display, which isn't a good thing. When we got into the driveway, she stopped mid-pace. The aura was definitely making me sick to my stomach. I had a massive pit, which is also a bad sign, and felt like I was going to puke. So I decided to get out of the car to relieve myself. However, when I looked at the window again, she was looking at me, and I could finally see her facial features. Her face was well-rounded. Her eyes were sunken in black pits with only red dots in the center of both, wearing this creepy, toothy grin, and her elongated fingers were slowly waving. I said, "Sorry guys, I'm out." I went back to the car. I was not going in that house. They understood because they saw what happened back there, and they told me they were going to do what they did last time, which, for a little bit of context, meant bring a Ouija board. Last time we were at a haunted place like this, they brought one and it did not go well. They all exited the car and went towards the front door. I decided to look at the window again because I had a feeling that I should, and when I looked over there, she was pressed against the glass. It looked like she was excited. I tried to use my flip phone because at the time I didn't have an iPhone to contact them, but my phone was no longer working, and so I stayed in the car. When they entered the building, the thing temporarily turned its head towards the staircase. I'm assuming it was the room she had been in, and then looked back at me with an even wider grin. Now, I knew she was going downstairs. I couldn't see much, but I could hear screaming and the sounds of a struggle. Half hour later they came out. They had some scratching, but nothing too severe, and the backpack that contained the Ouija board was not brought back with them. They all got into the car in a hurry and drove off. When I asked what happened, he said the spirit lady came down and attacked them, and that the Ouija board caught fire. I sat in silence for the rest of the trip after that. After they dropped me off, I told them that I wasn't going to go on any more of these excursions because I'd rather not risk my life over them. They agreed, and wished me the best of luck. Since that day I haven't seen them again. To be honest, I'm glad I didn't follow them in, because I don't know what horrors awaited them. I hope they're safe. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's collection of scary stories. If you did, be sure to let me know down below. And if something scary has ever happened to you, please send it to my email, themortismedia@gmail.com, which you can find below. I would love to hear it. I really am in need of stories now. So thank you all. And if you enjoyed that, tomorrow I'm going to be hitting you up with some cemetery stories for members and patrons. So if you are one, feel free to check it out then. And if you'd like to be one, well, you know what to do to find out more. And if not, I will always see you on Thursday for a very special video that I'm very excited for. Ghost stories from Japan. It's gonna be good. Till next time, guys, stay awesome and good night.